In this part of the tutorial, we will be adding color to our red blood cell. Firstly, let's go to the top bar of the interface. We are going to change the look of it. To do that, we are going to left click on the drop-down menu here, and we will be greeted by all these options to choose from. So what each mode does is they focus on different areas of managing 3D animation and modeling. But for our purpose, we're going to click on compositing. So left click, and there we go. You should see 3 windows right now. Before we get started, let's go through what each window is. The top one is our node editor, and this is the main window we'll be focusing on today. The one on the left is our image editor, and the one on the right is the default view, which most of you should be used to by now. One interesting part of this is if you hover your mouse over towards the right window, we will be still able to modify our object. So what I mean is, as long as our mouse is here, we can still do the things we did back in the default view. So let's say moving it. So remember, press G. Look at that. We can still move our object in this window. But what happens when the mouse isn't in this window? Let's press G again, and look at that. We cannot move it. So if you want to manipulate objects in here, make sure the mouse is also in there. Next, we're going to change our rendering engine from Blender Render to Cycles Render. So just click on Cycles Render and you should be fine. The rendering engine is the software that will process all the information we give about the model and then produces a 3D image. Okay, with that little bit of theory out of the way, let's make our first steps to coloring it in. Under the top window, there's a bar with some icons. Click on the circle, which is the shader, and then tick nodes. Your top window should have 2 boxes joined by a line right now. Before we go any further, I want to spend some time going over what you're seeing now. So come on, stay with me. Just a little bit more theory before we jump into it, okay? So the boxes here, right, they are each called nodes. And what each does is that they both have a different function. Diffuse BSDF determines what color our object will be, and material output applies the information it receives to our object. And the line in between is the cable that transmits the data from one node to the other. So, with that in mind, let's go over what we're seeing now. Right now, our color is white, and it is transmitting the information, be white, across the cable to our material output onto the surface of the object, right? So that means our object will be white in color. Now, we're trying to make a red blood cell, so our color obviously should be red. So we left click the white box, and then on this color wheel, we select red. Left click again, and just move your mouse out. So now, diffuse BSDF node is transmitting the signal be red across the cable to our material output onto the surface. So hopefully you have a nice general understanding of how these nodes work. So again, if you do find this a little bit confusing, it's okay, right? Just take some time and try to understand it. And hopefully, as you're doing it yourself, this will slowly make sense. So one other thing, say if you were joining some nodes and you accidentally connected to the wrong one, right? Say if you join it to volume, right? We don't want to actually apply a red color to volume. That's not what we want. We just want to apply the color to the surface. What you can do is we find where our node ends, we left click, and then we just drag it out. Look at that, just drag it out and just let go, right? Hold down left and let go. And there you go. This is how we can correct any mistakes when we're joining the nodes together. Now, we can add something cool, for example, a glossy effect to it. So we know how to do color, let's add an effect. So to add a cool effect like gloss, all we do is go to the bottom of our top window, so here, and click on add. Next we go to shader, and then we have all these options to choose from, right? A lot of things we can do to change how this object looks. And we find glossy BSDF, and we left click. So notice how once you've clicked it, where has this node gone? Well, if we move our mouse up to the node editor, there we go. It was hiding all along under. So it's attached to the mouse, and it'll only show if we're in the node editor. So like what we did earlier, to drop down an object, so to place it down, we left click. So we can left click. And there we go. We have placed down our glossy BSDF node. Now, okay, so we want to apply the glossy effect to our object, right? So this would be shown on the surface. So what we do is we have to transmit this signal, right? Be glossy along a cable to the surface. So all we have to do is hold down left click on this green dot, right? And then we just drag it towards the surface, and then we just let go. So as you can see now, we have connected them. But notice how once we've joined it, suddenly we don't have this red signal coming through. So this becomes a big problem if we want to combine both color and gloss to the surface of our object. To solve this problem, we need to add another node, and that is called the mix shader. So before I explain it, let's first add it in. So we go back to add, and then we go to shader, and under shader there is mix shader. We left click that, and remember it's hiding, right? We have to be in the node editor. Drag your mouse all the way up, and there we go. Mix shader has appeared. So what mix shader does is that it combines our red, our color, and our glossy effect together, and it produces an output which is a combination of both color and gloss. So what we do is we have to join our two nodes, our diffuse and our glossy ones, to the mix shader first. So we left click, right? Send the red signal down to here, send the glossy signal down to here, and then join our combined signal to our surface material output, and you will see that this connection between the gloss and the material output has disappeared. Now, if you don't like how messy this looks, there's a way to move it. And this does look really messy. I really have the urge to move things, right? I mean, who wants to see this like under and behind, right? Doesn't look very clean. So, I mean, if you're a fan of mess, please leave it. But if you're not, this is what we can do. All you have to do is select each node. We can left click or right click. Now this is odd, right? Because so far in Blender, everything we do to select an object is just right click. But in our node editor, it's just something special. We can left or right. Then to move, remember from the beginning in the basics, it's press G. So let's move this. So select, right? Orange border means you've selected it. Press G, move it along. See this one behind? Let's move it to the right. So select and press G, move that along, and there we go. it looks a bit more, well, a lot more tidier. So let's go through this one more time. Diffuse, our color node, right, and our glossy node, all are producing outputs, and they all go through the mix shader. And this mix shader combines the two bits of information it has received and produces one bit of information that comes out from here, and that's the combo of color and gloss, and this gets transmitted to our material output. So in the end, we get on our surface a combination of color and gloss. Now, one last thing. Notice this value here. What this value is referring to, it's the ratio of color to gloss. Now, if the value is very large, that means our object will be very glossy. If our value is smaller, it means there's less gloss and more color. So our red blood cell isn't actually very glossy object. So we have to turn it down. So there's no arrow to click on like the ones I showed you before. So all you have to do is left click in here and just enter a value that you want. So let's say for the purpose of this tutorial, 0.2. That's a nice low number. We just want more color than the gloss, but still show a bit of gloss in our object. Okay, so on to the final part. So once our nodes have been arranged like this, we want to generate our image and see what it's going to look like. And this is done through rendering. So rendering, we can either find the camera icon here and click render, or as I told you guys before, we can press F12. So either one works fine. So let's process this image. So click. So as you can see in the image editor here, your computer is currently processing this image. Now, depending on how good your computer is, the time it takes to process will vary. So there we have it. This is our red blood cell. So look at that. It looks a lot better than just bland this grayish color here. It's actually red. So there's one bit missing, and that is lighting. So lighting is another important aspect of 3D work. This is a very important part which we will be covering in the next tutorial. So far, well done with this red blood cell. You are almost there.